many of you already know that at one point in your life you want to have your own company and you want to be an entrepreneur? How many of you know that with 100% certainty that that's what you want to do? How many? Just a few hands. So, alright, so some of you want to build your own company. It's very good. Okay, so basically I can give you a big background about myself. I grew up in Germany. I lived most of my life in Scandinavia, in Stockholm, in Copenhagen. I studied in London and the US and in China for some time. And I came to Indonesia around 3.5 years ago. The first company that I started here was Zalora. Has any one of you shopped at Zalora before? How come the others have not shopped there yet? Zalora.co.id. So you can do that right after the lecture. So that was the very first company in September 2011. The second company then was Lazada. More people shopped at Lazada? Okay, I'll tell the guys at Lazada, they'll be happy. A few more people. And then Food Panda and so forth. So it's been 10 businesses that I helped starting over the last 3.5 years. So like Rocket Internet is the investor behind the company. So I was heading Rocket Internet in Southeast Asia. So we built Zalora, Lazada, Food Panda in all of the countries in Southeast Asia. So Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, and so forth. But I've been living here the last 3.5 years in Jakarta. So I'm becoming more and more Indonesian. So this has been my home the last 3.5 years. Alright, so the agenda, what I want to talk about is why I'm so bullish and so excited that I've chosen to be an entrepreneur in the internet space, because I think it's probably the most exciting time to start a company in that space. And I feel quite privileged that the internet just opened up so many opportunities for everyone to start their own business. That has been just really, really tough. You know, just a generation before me, it would have been so much more difficult to start a own company. So I just want to talk a bit more about the internet and just kind of show the opportunities that exist. And now that I'm an investor, I just want to talk a bit about the investment themes, like things that I'm looking for, teams that are building it, because I think it has huge potential. And it's more kind of my way of thinking through business models, what's very attractive and so forth. So I hope that helps a little bit. And then also, you know, kind of giving my perspective on Southeast Asia, and obviously Indonesia in particular, as the most important country in Southeast Asia, kind of what I have seen over the last 3 to 4 years, and kind of how I see it going forward. And then at the end, I will also show a bit more about entrepreneurship, on what I think are some qualities of really, really great founders and entrepreneurs. So you can check with yourself, how much you think you already are, and it's a great time to be a student. So that's the time where you should develop yourself as a person and learn as much as you can. So you can also bounce back with kind of like my list and kind of, what other areas you still want to use your time while being a student to develop yourself. So my background, as I said, was with Rocket Internet, but I left at the beginning of this year to start my own venture capital fund. So we invest in technology entrepreneurs, so the next generation. So as I'm getting a bit older, I felt it's the time that I switch the other side and focus on investing. So I've done a few investments in Indonesia. The first one that I did turned out to be quite lucky for me. So the first investment I made was with Traveloka, the flight booking site. So it was very clear that you see all the other countries in the world, how it has internet enabled people to book their tickets online. It's just a much more convenient way. So that was kind of one of the early investments that I've made here. But at the beginning of this year, I decided that I'll decide all my time on the fund. So we set up a new fund together with Peng and Koi, my two partners in the fund. So Peng, he started Match.com, the online dating site, in 1994. So that was 4 years before I had my first email address. So he's literally the very first generation of internet entrepreneurs. So he lived for around 15 years in Silicon Valley, the last 5 years in China, and actually just last month he also moved to Jakarta. So he's spending time between Singapore and Jakarta, but also someone like him, which has a huge name on a global scale, also chooses to move to Jakarta to invest in young entrepreneurs building businesses. I think that also speaks for himself. Interwoven was then Peng's second company, which he listed on NASDAQ and very successfully. Koi, he was the former CEO of Infocom, which is the venture capital fund of the Singaporean government. So all of us, we have built companies before, and that was kind of like the point why we started it, because we felt there's a great gap of a venture capital fund with people who built companies before, who can then help not only with like capital but also with knowledge and experience on how to build companies. So why am I so excited about the internet? So we have Mark Andreessen. So he was actually the same university as Peng, so they know each other for 20 years. He coined the phrase "software is eating the world," and it's probably one of the most profound things how the world kind of changes with the technological progress we have seen. That software is just changing so many industries that probably 20 years ago no one even would have closely imagined to that extent. So if you see like the music industry, well, you're all quite young, but at least I still remember you used old, well, there was like obviously the compact discs, but even before, you have the tape recorders. Direct marketing, well, that should show like the screen is a different format. It should show magazines and newspapers. So if you wanted to advertise your business, your local business, you used the newspapers. Same with DVDs. You had like the cassettes and photos. You took like the Polaroid. So everything was physical. The phone, the travel agent, you went yourself, or financial services. Well, we still use credit card, but I'm a big believer how financial services will change profoundly over the next years. So we've seen iTunes, Google, Netflix, YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp. If you just look at all these services, they all started in the last 10 years. And what a huge impact they had on industries that often didn't change for, if you look at direct marketing with newspapers, an industry that hasn't changed for 100 years, suddenly is extremely disrupted by someone like Google. So, looking back, it's quite an enormous time of change that we live in. I think, so that's one of the things truly exciting. And that's kind of like the huge shift that we're seeing is what we call the shift from atoms to bits. So atoms meaning like physical products. What we have seen with like music, it was a physical product that was distributed before. So now with iTunes and Spotify, it becomes software. So we're moving from physical products, from atoms to bits, software that is eating the world. So one of the things that also I wanted to show is just how fast these companies grow and how valuable they become. So if we look at a company like Hilton Hotels, have 314,000 employees around the world. Valuation, I think, it doesn't show up. I think it should say $15 billion. And it has hotels, physical hotels, all around the world. But the stock market values the company at around $15 billion US dollars. And then we have Airbnb, started in 2008. So basically everybody can rent out their own extra bedroom that you have or your living room. All they basically do, they don't have any physical products. They don't own any of the beds that they rent out. All they do is create a marketplace online where people can list an extra bedroom, but people give a value to Airbnb of $10 billion, and they achieve this with 600 employees. Another example of atom versus bits is Uber. As we heard before, one of the huge successes we have seen over the last years within the technology space. So we have old companies in the transportation sector. I picked here Peugeot from France, valued at $8 billion. The valuation, this is funny, this is a 2-month-old figure. Uber is now valued at $40 billion. So people give Uber a valuation, it's worth 6 times as much as Peugeot. And Peugeot, huge company with 202,000 employees. Uber with, well, now they've grown very fast, but 2 months ago was around 1,000 employees. Just a few more examples. In the telecom space, again, huge infrastructure projects, massive to build up these companies. And then we have someone like Airbnb, with WhatsApp, only started in 2009. A few folks who kind of programmed a very simple mobile messaging app that probably most of you use here in the auditorium. And they were acquired by Facebook for 18 billion. So it's just how massively fast and how massively valuable like new technology companies can become. It's quite astonishing. Just last example, Hasbro as like a toy manufacturer. They own so many brands, so many like movie channels, and also for with 10,000 employees. And then we have King.com, which is valued higher, which is just creating digital content, mobile games that you can play on your Android phone or iOS phone. So we've seen like this rise of new technology companies that have just taken over, industries that existed for over 100 years. So quite extraordinary times. So why is it that suddenly we can build so big companies so fast? So there's a few things. So if you wanted to start your own internet company just in 2000, it would have cost you a tremendous amount of money. So that's why most startups that had an idea, they actually first needed to raise $4 million, $5 million to get everything up in the infrastructure that you needed. Today, you can do this for almost nothing. Like everybody can start their own online company like today, and it goes so fast, and you don't need the capital requirements than like 15 years ago. So it's quite extraordinary. So if you wanted to set up your own company at the time, you needed to have like the systems where today you can just sign up to AWS from Amazon. Databases, office productivity, customer service, video conference, recruiting, sales, advertising, marketing, fulfillment. So all these things from a cost perspective, it was very hard to set up, it was very costly. Today, all these services are more or less for free. We have distribution channels that we haven't had 15 years ago. So if you launch your own business, you can advertise on Google, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth right away. You can reach people with a massive scale that was just not possible just 15 years ago. And also the time that it takes to build products. If you look just the development cycle, just in 2000, just with the existing tools that existed, it took you like 18 months to program something. Like today, it can go within days. So just the costs of building a business have drastically come down. We can reach, literally, 3 billion consumers around the world. We could reach them today. If you come up with an amazing product and an amazing service, a WhatsApp could have been created here at Binus University. There's no reason why that can only be done in San Francisco. So this is one thing that could have been, developed here, and with Google, Facebook, and so forth. Now, for the first time, we have like global distribution platforms, so you'll be found if you have a great product, and also the time that it takes to build something has become much faster. So with all these things about the internet that we have seen, so what are some of the things that excites me the most? And I just picked like 3 investment themes where I just encourage you to think about if you're thinking about starting your own business. So the 3 that I just picked in kind of more themes, and it's more ways of thinking about it than I want someone who builds that business. One is I call networks break hierarchies. The second one is specialist unbundled services, and the third one is mobile connects everything. So what do I mean with network break hierarchies? So I used 3 examples here: Twitter, SoundCloud, and Kickstarter. I guess Twitter is the most known out of the 3 that I picked. And basically, I think Twitter was started in 2007, late 2007. So it just changed radically communication since then. So before Twitter existed as a service, there were clear hierarchies. If you wanted to have your voice heard for like a global community, you needed to go to like magazines or newspaper. There was like an editor. So it was a quite bureaucratic process if you wanted to have your voice heard. Now with Twitter, you take out your smartphone out of your pocket and you can reach followers, anywhere that you have in the world. So if you have something smart and special to say, like people will start following you, and you can bring your message across right away. So it's a network that replaces like a hierarchical model that you needed to go and kind of, okay, I wrote my story, I want to like share it with the world, and you go to like editors and knock on doors. So that's one of the examples of how a network replaces a hierarchy. The second example of such a business model is SoundCloud out of Berlin. So basically everyone who produces music can upload their music on SoundCloud, and it's a marketplace, it's a network for everybody to kind of find artists, and it brings like artists and music lovers together. So that's like another process where, before SoundCloud started, I think 4.5 years ago, if you were like an artist and you had produced an amazing quality of music and that you were sure that people will love, but you still would have to knock on the doors of Universal Studios, of all the big gatekeepers that decided for the consumers, what they want to produce. Now that choice will be directly between the artists and the consumers. So another example of how a network replaces hierarchy. So you just cut out the middleman with the use of technology. And the third example is Kickstarter. So if you have an idea, you want to build a 3D printer or any kind of product that you have in mind, and you think the world would love my product. Now you just advertise it on the marketplace. You list it on Kickstarter your idea, and you can find backers, people who want to buy the product, who believe in it, and who donate directly to you, instead of like the old process that you needed to either go to like a bank or an investor and ask for money, who would then be the gatekeeper in a quite hierarchical process. Like now, you have like a network. You get your idea out, and then people who will love your idea, they will have the opportunity to sponsor you. So that's like 3 examples of just that way of thinking, that hierarchies will be replaced by networks and technology platforms. And that's why there will be so many opportunities of such business models in the future. So just think about yourself, like all the things that you are annoyed because you have to ask someone for permission, or you find the process extremely bureaucratic. Like whenever you are annoyed, there's a big chance someone else will be annoyed about the same process. And hey, some people will complain, and some people see that as an opportunity. There must be something to it. Is there like a way, can I create like a company or like a business out of that? So think about your own daily life. What are all the things that annoy you, and what you think is a problem? And then is there like a way around it to create like a service that, maybe in a similar way that what they have done, like solves the problem, not only for you, but for other people as well. The second type of way of thinking that I want to emphasize is that specialists will unbundle services. So we have 3 examples that I picked: TransferWise, Lending Club, and Netflix. Maybe Netflix is the most common name out of like the 3. So on Netflix, you log on online, and you can just pick the movies that you like, and you just pay for the things that you like. So not like traditional television where you have to subscribe to 50 channels, but you literally only use 5 or 6, and you have to pay for the rest of 46, still additionally, but you only pay for the movies and exactly the content that you like. So that's like an example of, specialists will unbundle, services that so far you only got like, very bundled service. TransferWise is a good example as well. They are a peer-to-peer service if you want to transfer money with digital currencies. So if you want to transfer money from Indonesia to family members you may have in Malaysia, there's very high fees that banks charge on such an international transaction. So what TransferWise thought, like, okay, first again that feeling of I'm annoyed that I have to pay so much in fees to my bank. Can that not be solved in a smarter way? So what they've seen is, transfers, interbanking transfers within the same country, the fees are actually okay, but it's only with international transfers that it's so expensive. So what TransferWise has done, they just set up a system that, instead of like doing international transaction with a bank, what they do is you transfer the money to TransferWise from Jakarta to their Jakarta office, and then they will use the same amount to go from the London office to transfer them into country with that. So it's basically a very simple setup that they created, but it solves a huge problem that people just have to pay extremely high fees. So if you look at the whole banks and kind of all the services they provide, they saw that there's one thing that banks really are not good at, or they just charge way too high fees. Is there a way around it? And they become like a specialist in that just international transfer field. And the second example here is Lending Club, which, with Lending Club, they just went on its stock exchange last week in New York. Huge success story. And basically what they have found, the whole process of getting a loan from the bank is also extremely painful. You go to the bank, you say, I need a loan. It will actually take quite a lot of time for them to figure out like credit worthiness, and it's not a very pleasant process to go through as a consumer. But basically what the banks do is actually not so complicated. They will normally go to like the credit bureau, look at your credit score, they will get back and then say, okay, that's then the loan that we can offer you. So it's a quite simple process for which the banks take quite a high fee. So Lending Club said, okay, why don't we just completely cut out the middleman, the bank? People will register for a loan. The software will just automatically look up, the credit scoring, and will use a lot of other credit scoring metrics on top of that. So it's actually a much smarter way than most banks do it, still in 2014. And then we'll offer, that we have the credit score, so we'll offer directly to consumers, what is the loan that we can give them. So they cut out the bank again. It's a pure software. It's a software-based, product that they built. And as an end result, the fees that the bank will charge on top of it, you get rid of that. So the loan ultimately will be significantly lower. So another example of a process that was quite painful for people, which they thought, okay, how can we solve this that consumers don't feel that bad anymore applying for a loan. And that's that's really difficult to read on the format. But basically, what it shows is it's like an old website of Craigslist. So just services that were previously just listed on classified models, and all specialist services that are replacing them. And it's the same here, an overview about all the services that banks provide. So payment processing, currency exchange, and many of the things. You see more and more technology companies going in that space, becoming a specialist in just one thing, but they do it really, really well and much better for consumers. So banks and financial services will really, is one of the things that I'm looking very actively for investments, because most people are not that happy with their bank. So I think that's one of the next great areas where technology companies can make quite a big difference in offering better services to consumers. And the third point out of the three that I want to mention is just the unbelievable power of the smartphone. And like everybody talks about the smartphone and how it changes things, but I still think, even though there's like a huge hype, it's still way underappreciated on what can be done with our smartphones. So there's so many services. So we talked about before. Instead of like standing on the street and waiting for like a Uber or express taxi, you don't have to stand there for like 10 minutes looking like an idiot, waiting for like a taxi. So what you do is you leave from home, you just press the button, they'll say, okay, we'll arrive in 5 minutes. You get out of your door in 5 minutes and the taxi's there. Pretty much a smarter solution than it was before. So great service, all possible because of the smartphone. Square is a credit card reader, so everybody can accept payments through a credit card, or Runkeeper is a way that you can measure your own fitness. You can kind of the quantify itself, that you can see all the data, how many steps you have walked with all the sensors that are in the smartphone. So you know much more about your own, you get smarter about your own health data and so forth. So there's so many things that can be done with the help of smartphones. So hugely disrupting technology that changes a lot of things. So that was kind of like the three, Mobile connects everything. So here I used a few services. So as I said, transportation. So this is a US venture capital firm, the slide. But if we just apply that here to Indonesia, within the transportation space, we have Grab Taxi, Easy Taxi, or obviously now also Bluebird offering that with a smartphone. You can order your phone. But dining and so forth, as I said before, with Food Panda, I hope all of you are using Food Panda. You just press the button and the food will come to you if you're like in a hurry. A great way, a very disruptive service, and I think great for people to do that. So you have in the delivery space, event space, across a lot of different industries, new businesses that only exist because of the rise of smartphones. All right. So the third point is more also a bit about sharing about my own kind of learnings and kind of my own 3.5 years in Indonesia. So just kind of to appreciate how easy it is now to start a business with just short 4 years ago. So when I came with Zalora, so obviously what we wanted to be the leading online destination platform for fashion. So everyone looking for fashion, Zalora would be the place to go. And we wanted to give free shipping across the whole country, all over Indonesia. So that was the mission. If you want to start a business today in the US, it's not so difficult because everything works. You have a working logistics infrastructure. It's actually pretty easy to do that. Like here in Indonesia at the time, when I was looking to make the logistics network and the supply chain so we can deliver all over Indonesia, I needed to have 17 different logistics companies to build like my own little network, because there wasn't kind of one national logistics companies like UPS in the States. So what it meant at the beginning, that if you wanted to send like a package to the far eastern part, it often would have had over 4 times with a different logistics company. So the first logistics company would pick it up in the warehouse, they would bring it to the next one, take a plane ride, hand it over to the next logistics company, hand it over another time, and then the last regional logistics company would then finally bring it to the doorstep of consumers. So quite a headache to actually set this up at the beginning. So logistics was one of the huge headaches, and that's why we put a lot of money into building up the own logistics infrastructure. But what we've seen over the last 3 to 4 years is we have an incredible amount of smart entrepreneurs which try to solve the problem of logistics here. So we have Gojek, like quick delivery on like the OJEX within Jakarta. Beta Asia or e-commerce, which offer the whole solutions if you want to start your own online shop, that they will take care of the whole fulfillment. So there's a lot of things that they all started the last 3 to 4 years. So now you want to start a business today, you can plug into all these services that were not here 4 years ago. It's just as an appreciation of how much the ecosystem has grown. Next to logistics, the second huge pain point at the beginning to build the companies was payments. Like credit card penetration in Indonesia is still around 4%. Most of the studies say. So it's still a very low penetration of credit cards, which is the predominant way of payment online in Europe and the US. So what we needed to do is we built a cash on delivery system that didn't exist at the time, but we said, okay, if it doesn't exist, we'll just have to build it ourselves. So that's what we did. So we worked with all the logistics company to build up the cash on delivery infrastructure. So now, if you don't have a credit card, you still order your goods, they will show up magically at your doorstep, and then you can pay in cash, from home. So that's another thing that didn't exist with payment at the time. But we have a lot of great entrepreneurs working now in the payment space. So Veritrans, Doku, the 2 leading kind of payment players right now in Indonesia. Rio, he started Veritrans 3 years ago, and now it's the dominant payment company in Indonesia. So that's the exciting thing, that we're still very early at like just this huge wave that will be the next 10, 20 years. So this is, you'll still have time, so you don't have to like rush out of the door now. It's a long-term trend, what we're seeing. And if you look at these big companies that exist, they literally just started the last 3 to 4 years. And it's the same thing that Rio realized that it's just so painful to make payments online that he said, okay, why am I not the person who started business? And I will learn everything that I can about the payment space. And now 3 years later, I guess he has around 100 employees, hugely successful. One of the other challenges at the time, and which is hugely improving, is also like the talent pool. So I still remember also at the time with Zalora, I was then looking, who are the best people within online marketing in Indonesia at the time, who know all the new techniques, retargeting techniques, and so forth. And they didn't really exist at the time. It was just the whole ecosystem just is starting off. If you look at all the large e-commerce companies. They didn't exist 3-4 years ago. Or William with Tokopedia, who started 5 years ago. But the talent level is just hugely improving. So I think really, and we're really engaged in the education part. So we're setting up a lot of initiatives with Monks Hill, and Peng, my partner, he's extremely dedicated to that space. So we'll set up a lot of scholarships to also send people from Jakarta to the US to see like latest knowledge and research there at universities, come back and then start companies. So we are very involved in that space, and I'm just seeing how fast the talent level is improving. And then just about the ecosystem, a few more things that didn't exist, just 2 to 3 years ago, was certainly like investors. So yes, now we set up our own investment fund where we invest in young people, but we have all the strategic players from banking, the telcos, to media companies like MTech, Indosat Telkom. They all set up funds to invest in young entrepreneurs. We have conglomerates like cinemas, like Lipo Group, all waking up on how huge the whole technology space will become over the next years. And it's literally only the last 1 to 2 years they allocated or started their divisions to invest in technology companies. So we have the huge rise of co-working spaces. So great way if you're starting a company or your own startup, to mingle with other entrepreneurs. So we're seeing like freeware. Now we just opened our office in Conclave in Senopati, also a really beautiful co-working space. So they pop up everywhere around Jakarta and Indonesia. So it's a great way how the whole ecosystem is growing up, and a great way for people to start their companies. And we see accelerators and incubators. So as I said, like Indosat, they have their own kind of mentoring programs. The Telkom cell has that. So we see more and more of the big companies going in that space. And events grow significantly. So, and that's also, we've seen a lot of companies over the last years then also being acquired from bigger international players. So, who do we have here? Like Vicky maybe is a good example. Based in Singapore, they built a marketplace for TV shows with an international flavor. So if you are based in Jakarta but you love Korean movies and Korean sitcoms, that's the place where you can go to. And they have been acquired for $200 million by Rakuten a few months ago. So that's some of the things that I wanted to touch upon with investment themes and what I see changing in the marketplace. So one of the things, just let me quickly switch. So one of the things that is kind of the last part of the presentation is what makes a great entrepreneur. So also for yourself, kind of reflect what are the areas that I'm good at, what do I still need to develop. I want you to come up with, what are the top 10 traits that I have seen as an investor, or also myself within Rocket, seeing so many founders of each of the businesses. So what do I think makes extremely good entrepreneur versus mediocre or not so good entrepreneurs? So one of the things that's one of the key skills that I look for if I invest in a team or a startup is you need at least one person on the team that can really convince people. And if you don't have that someone yet in a team that you're thinking, it makes sense to probably look for someone like that. Because if you're starting a company out of nothing, you need to do a lot of convincing. You need to convince people to join your team if you're doing recruiting that they should join your your new startup, instead of going to like Telkomsel or any of the banks, and more like the corporate jobs. So you need to convince people of the mission on what you want to build. You need to convince the first suppliers that they put their products on your platform. You need to convince the first customers that they use your service. So if you don't have that skills, and perfectly fine, some are very introverted and a more reflective person, but then kind of like see already and kind of think, who of my friends would be like a very good complementary skill to what I can offer, but someone that can convince people is one of the key things of building a company. The second point I want to, you need to have courage. And it's so easily said that, oh, I want to start my own company. You get out of university, you take your first job, you get like a monthly salary, and you can become quite comfortable. It then takes courage to say, okay, fine, I won't have my salary anymore, but I really believe I can make a difference with building something by myself. And it's so easily said, but it's quite something different than to actually take the step and say, okay, I believe in my idea, whatever it takes, I want to build it. So that takes courage. And I'm helping a lot of like new startups then to recruit people for the founding team, and you often see people are interested, but if you really want to start something, it actually takes courage that you really believe in what you want to do. The third point, and that's actually one of the things that I often test in interviews and try to filter the personalities of people. Like, you need to love making decisions. If you don't love making decisions, it's very tough to be an entrepreneur. And I've seen great people, great backgrounds, but just one difference was that people love making decisions and the other were always, let me think about this one more day, or let me just do this one more analysis, and always kind of postponing making decisions. And at some point, that just didn't work. So you need to create a mindset that you want to take decisions fast. And if you make a mistake, it will happen all the time. And it's fine. You'll make another decision to change the direction. But you need to take so many decisions every day if you start your own company. Even from the very early days, how shall my logo look like? What is the name of the company? And then, the first time you interview people, if you look for like a head of sales, do I want to hire this person, or shall I wait for someone else who's better? So there are all these things that, on an everyday basis, you need to take decisions, so you better love taking them. The fourth point I have here is that you need to stay humble, and you need to learn to embrace mistakes and learn from them, because none of the businesses that were created always went up. Like, even if you look at the most successful companies today in the technology space, so if you look at the most successful company, most valued on the stock exchange, is Apple. But when Steve Jobs tried to find investors that he believed in his little funny box, the Macintosh, that was a huge struggle for him to convince people that that's a better computer than anything else out there. He really struggled to find investors that believed in his mission that the funny box could really change the world. So he was struggling for a long, long time. And then even in the late 90s, you had like Business Week magazine, having the Apple logo, a very famous cover, the fall of Apple, and kind of how they predicted the end of Apple computer, and now it's the most valuable internet company or technology company again. So you need to stay humble and learn from failures, because they will come, and that's just part of building a company. The next point is you need to be dedicated and persistent, because of what I said. It will never be just everything blue skies. There will be the rainy days and there will be the tough days. and there will be the one contract that you don't sign with the customers you really, really wanted. There is a key employee that is leaving you. There is like you hired someone and it turns out to be really, really, really not good. So you make the tough decision to lay that person off. And you feel miserable on these days. And that's also part of the journey. So if you're expecting that it will only blue days, blue skies, that's just not the case. So you need to be persistent and really dedicated and see the long term what you want to build. One of the things, I guess that doesn't only apply to entrepreneurship, but I guess to life in general, is that you take time to think. We can all be very, very busy every day. There's always something else we could, any news we could read or a movie we could watch. But if you build a company and then you have the responsibility for employees that you have hired, it's very important that you take the time to think. Not only the next 3 to 6 months, but how are things changing in the market that I'm in, and how do I want to react to it. So one of the things that I often tell entrepreneurs that I think they're too busy doing things on an everyday basis and they don't take enough time to take time off and think about things from a different perspective. And the best entrepreneurs, they do that. So when you launch your startup and you build your first product, whether it's a mobile application or whatever, you are super excited. The one thing that I often see is that people don't talk to users or consumers that should actually use the app. And that's one of the common mistakes, and I just don't know why. Because if you build something, get feedback, talk to people, what do you think of my app? Put the smartphone in their hand and say, what do you think about it? And constantly get feedback and talk to your users. And I have a good friend, he's a great guy, so he built a product. It was like a mobile location sharing app. And it was quite successful. And then he decided that he wanted to change slightly something around it. So for like 3 weeks he was just sitting in his room coding and just getting like the next version of the product out. And then he didn't talk at all for consumers or his users for like at the time like more or less like months. And he just saw that he built something that actually people didn't want. And so it's just so important that you understand what customers really want. So you need to get out of your door and talk to people. You can't do that behind the desk. One other advice that I have and things that I see in great entrepreneurs is their extreme precision and focus. They know where they want to go, and there's anything in the world can happen, but it doesn't change a thing for them because they have that focus and building the company that they envision. So that's one of the key qualities, focus, that I see. The second part is you need to attract and retain the best people, and that's two different things. Attracting people and then keeping your best people. Two different things, but both of these points are usually important in building a company. So if you're an entrepreneur or you want to start your own company, start talking to people that you could see working with you in your company right away. And if you look at the most successful companies like Facebook, they started on campus at university. If you look at Dropbox, same thing. So if you just look at the number of startups and companies that were created while they were on campus at student time, it's incredible. So already, look within this room or in your lectures that you have, who would be people you want to work with? Because often, we see very successful teams that have met, at university. We talked about Tokopedia before, but Bukalapak, similar successful company, marketplace, and Fajar and Zaki, they went together, best buddies at ITB in Bandung, And what a great way of finding your co-founders and creating the team. So already think about that today. And the number one thing that really changes if you're like a great entrepreneur from a mediocre one is that you pick something that you really, really love. If you don't love what you're doing, you will never ever be the most successful person doing that. So take that time on really understanding what do you love doing. Because only if you're kind of working on something like that, you'll be tremendously successful. So that's easier said than done. But I have two things. So one is from Fab.com, an e-commerce company that sells design furniture, and from the founder of Fab. So when he started his company, he was actually drawing the circle on a napkin. When he was thinking, he just knew that he wanted to start a new company, but he was kind of figuring out what he should do. So he had like the three parts. What was he passionate about? What is a really big market? And then what can I be the best at? And then when he was like thinking through all these things, he really loves design. And he also thought he's pretty good at it. He understands the market. And it's also a huge market if you look at just the number of products people buy. So, that's, I think, a great way of kind of, what are you passionate about? What can you do best at? And what is also a really big market. And I guess Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal, the first investor in Facebook, on a similar note, he wrote, what can I do? What is really valuable? And what are others not doing? So where there's still opportunities. So as you kind of reflect on what you could potentially build in the future, I think that's good starting points. Has any one of you seen the movie Up? Very good. So I guess that's kind of the final note, is with the analogy of the movie Up. And it's basically like everybody can dream, just don't dream too long so you don't miss the ride of your life. So he was dreaming about the journey for such a long time, but ultimately he went on the journey, and he had the time of his life. So that's kind of, I like the movie, and I think that's one of the stories and kind of final points for you is also when you think about starting your own company, just do it. You won't regret it. So, thank you very much.